Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever in the world you are. And welcome to you, Benji.
Hi, thank you for having me. To our viewers, good day to you all. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we've got some interesting news. Yesterday, one of the presidential candidates withdrew from the rat race. Mr. Douglas Mwonzora of the MDC Alliance, MDC stroke MDC. And in a press conference, he gave his reasons why. Let's just listen to the conversation, then we can have a discussion.
Similar or even worse cases were favorably treated by the courts and were favorably granted by the courts. The MDC case, as usual, was thrown out on mere technicalities. Whereas the Zimbabwe Election Commission, in some cases, sided with candidates, sided with political parties seeking enfranchisement. In the case of the MDC, they put a spirited performance, a spirited fight against the inclusion of the 87. For that reason, our people were disenfranchised. For that reason, 87 constituencies have been denied the right to vote. Now, some time ago, the high-level political platform secured funding for training of polling agents. The high-level political platform is a platform which is brokered by the Zimbabwe Institute, and it is made up of 3 political parties represented in parliament. That is the MDC, CCC, and Zanu PF. These parties secured funding for the training and deployment of polling agents, and it secured funding to the tune of 3 million euro that was supposed to be used in this regard. The training and deployment of polling agents is important to ensure transparency in an election. As you know, in 2018, about 2,000 polling stations did not have MDC polling agents. And we had thought that we were going to cure this problem. And the money was actually secured from from some of the philanthropic donors. However, the Zanu PF has blocked this money, with the net result that the MDC and the other parties are unable at least to fund their election agents. This is intended to ensure that there's opaqueness in this election. It is intended to make sure that rigging of elections is expedited, or it is enabled. Our constitution provides that once the election dates have been declared, there must not be change in electoral law. But contrary to all this, just last week, there was promulgation of a statutory instrument to govern postal votes, to govern an aspect of this election. And this is totally illegal.
Well, we can stop there, Benji. What do you think?
And no, I think he's twisting twisting the case just to suit him. I think there's more to his boycott than just the technicalities of the courts and everything. I think he himself, he sees. I mean, firstly, let's look at how he couldn't even secure the candidates. Firstly, and that itself should tell you that that is a party that is going downhill. For me, that would be something that is very easy to tell. And Of course, yes, there's the issue of funding. If the funds were made available, I agree with him. Money should have gone to the intended use, but there should not be an excuse. Secondly, why his case lost would probably because his case was different from the 12 that had, or let's say the 12 and many others that had were actually there in line on the date in question, but because of technical issues at the offices or at the nomination court, he wasn't there. They rocked up later the following day, and they wanted to partake of that. I don't think it was fair. I think the judgment there is the right call.
Well,
You can't cry
on that
over that.
point, I have to admit that I really don't know the details of the 87 who were disqualified in this case. But if it should turn out to be that they were exactly in the same shoes as the other 12 for MDC and all the other, I think 156 others who were going to be pending if the judgment of the High Court in Bulawayo had been upheld, then then he has got a fair point. But like you said, if they turned up, they were not in the queue at the closing time. That's the party's fault. We can't change the rules just to suit the party.
Yes, I mean, if this is why I was saying if it was the same case, I don't think there was merit to turn them away because I mean they're all in the same boat. A lot of candidates because of technicalities, but it is said that his candidates rocked up the next day because a lot of these guys did not have money. Let's look at the case of Linda. Wanted to be a presidential candidate. She rocked up late, and that is why her case was thrown out. That's why it was different from that of Valerio.
Yeah.
So
Well, let's go on to the next one. I mean, some of these assertions are totally meaningless.
bogus.
So
Yeah.
the 87 to start with, I think your understanding is I totally agree with it. That was my understanding too. That in this case, they were not exactly the same. But it's also his judgment that ZEC were favorable to other parties and not to him. We should not forget that Mwonzora actually benefited from the High Court judgment in 2019 that said Chamisa had seized power illegally. So there is some precedence there that the courts had made judgments in his favor. So what is he complaining about?
Nah, people always tend to complain when the stick is going the other way. So yeah, this is it. No, when it comes to Zek being favorable, like we said, I personally think, and from what the news says, it is actually different. There are different cases. So Zek had the names of the people that filed the same day, but after 12 or after the cut, no, not after 12, but after the 4 o'clock deadline. And unfortunately, his candidates were not part of that. And then hence they were chucked away. If they were part of it, I don't see any reason why Zek would be unfavorable to them when they actually just brought out all the other names. Why would they just chuck his away? It's impossible.
Well, I think the merits of that we can dismiss with the contempt it rightly deserves. But what I think is of importance here is that here is an individual who has participated in these elections all along, and now he wants to pretend that somehow the system is not favorable to him, and he wants to withdraw from the elections. There were many other reasons why he should have withdrawn from the elections in the past, and there were good reasons too, and yet they never did. He has consistently participated in these elections, and now because let's face it, his popularity has been going down, and these rallies were poorly attended, and now he suddenly wants to pretend that he is one who upholds the law, and these elections are flawed. It's laughable, I think that is a point that must be made here. There were good reasons in the past for MDC to boycott elections, and to boycott them because of some of these reasons that is offering now is laughable.
Let's, like you're saying, the good question would be, if you were to ask him what has changed now that wasn't there back then, or what's different now that that wasn't there way back. The rigging was always there, the unfair practices were always there. So what has changed, or what drove you to see otherwise? I think, like you rightfully said, is you can see that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. It's just a sheer waste of time. And I don't think, I mean, the percentages will tell you. I mean, he was there during the run, the reruns for those not the rerun, the by-elections. He couldn't garner anything, and his numbers were pathetic. So I think he's just realizing, and now the sole guy he is, and he doesn't want his followers to see that he was leading them nowhere all this time. You would rather blame it on somebody else. You'd rather pin it on somebody else, and that's exactly what he's doing. Because there's nothing. It's still the same Zek that has been doing his business for all these years. There's nothing that has changed. The environment, the political environment in Zimbabwe is still the same. Nothing has changed. People are still getting killed. People are still getting forced to do things that they don't want. People are still getting bribed and all that. It's still the same thing. What has changed? Why did he do this in 2018? Back then, he wanted to be the leader of this. He was fighting tooth and nail to be the leader of this thing. Now, what has changed? That's a good question that he should be able to answer. And I don't think he has the answer. Hence, he'll rather pin it on somebody else.
Yeah, and I think the other key point that he's mentioning there is the issue of the 3 million euros that had been made available to train and finance the deployment of election agents. There are 2 points there. The number one is that in 2018, according to him, 2,000 or so polling stations did not have election agents. The last time that I heard Nelson Chamisa admitting on the same point was on a interview with a South African TV station, and he admitted that 544 polling stations did not have election agents. Is that your understanding too?
Yes, I remember Chamisa saying that I don't think he apologized for that, but he actually stated that over 500 polling stations had nobody. And I would like to believe the number Mwonzora is talking about could be true. Because I mean, some rural areas, it's very, very difficult to even get access to. And especially when you don't have funding and you don't have vehicles, like how Zanu PF Zanu PF has got all the resources. And I would truly believe from all those polling stations that were available or made available for voters to cast their ballots, I don't think MDC then had the funds to cover most of them. I think they covered as much as they could given their resources, but I'm
Well,
sure it's more than 500. I'm
I,
sure.
I think in this particular case, what is objectionable here is that Chamisa is misleading the Zimbabwean public. Why is he saying it was 544 when now we're hearing that it was 2,000 or so, 4 times as many? And I think this is deliberate because also during when the results of the 2018 elections started coming out, the first one to declare the results and that Nelson Chamisa had won was Tendai Biti. But when he tried to nail him on, okay, how many votes did Chamisa get? You would not say. You would only say, oh, yes, won about 61%. Yeah, 61% of what? How many altogether are there? And throughout the whole discussion, you could not get MDC Alliance then to say how many V11 forms they had. At one point, they said they had all of them. And then they started claiming that Chamisa had 2.6 million votes. And they could account for them. They had the V11 to show where the 2.6 million came from. And after the press conference, they will allow the reporters to view the V11. And they conveniently didn't facilitate that. So you can see it as a deliberate act of deceiving the people. And I think this is one of the things that Zimbabweans should really wake up to. Why are you not telling us the truth? Why are you telling us that you'll be guarding the vote? And then it turns out, in this particular case, in 2018, there were about 11,000 polling stations. And you failed to field election agents in 2,000 or so. That's about 20%. That is very significant, particularly when the winning candidates go on to win by 0.8%. Why are you saying you are guarding the vote and yet you are not? I think that point must be emphasized.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at the court challenge that they went through when Chamisa lost the presidential election. They claimed they had V11. They did not have any V11. That is the truth. That is what the court said. And it was not just the witnesses were there. MDC then it was MDC had just, good talkers, but no shred of evidence. That is why the case lacked merit. They could not prove their case, which meant they did not have anyone, close to that number of. I think 2,000 could be the right figure. Mwonzora is perfectly correct to say it was more than the 500 that Chamisa was selling. You would obviously play it down, because he's trying to say now he's cleverer, he's wiser, he's deployed more people. But I know for a fact that in the rural areas, once again, it's going to be the same challenge. Nobody's going to be there. And it's going to be just the repeat of the same old thing.
Well, in this case here, according to Mwonzora, they had secured 3 million euros to train and to pay for the deployment of these election agents. Now, Zanu PF has blocked that money. Zanu PF has got funds of its own, and so it can deploy its own election agents. Does CCC have the funding now to deploy, to train and deploy the election agents? I think it's a pertinent question that Zimbabweans out there should ask and demand an answer.
I personally don't think so. I really don't think CCC has got the funding to field agents in over 11,000 for 12,000 now polling stations. I don't think it's, in some areas it's so inaccessible, and some areas in the rural areas is compromised because we all know what is happening in the rural areas. People are getting beaten up, people are getting forced by chiefs, they're being threatened by chiefs that if you go and vote against Zanu PF, your good is dead. Right? This is somebody that is of stature saying things like that, and then you're also risking your livelihood. You can be barred from staying in his area. I mean, that's what chiefs do. So somebody will not be able
I think in this particular case, we've got to agree that is another problem, another dimension to the problem of deploying election agents. But if you are not even deploying them because you don't have the resources in the first place, then Zanu PF does not have to threaten anybody. They've got a field day. They know that you haven't got the money. You are not going to deploy anybody. And in this particular case, if you're going to deploy them, you haven't even trained them. And the whole thing is chaotic. And I think that is the point that must be made. If in 2018, MDC Alliance failed to deploy election agents in 2,000 or so, or 20% or so of the polling stations, that is something that should have been addressed. Particularly when you've got a situation here where you do not have the confidence in the rest of the institutions responsible for running these elections. You don't have confidence in SEC. You don't have confidence in the police. You don't have confidence in all the other ancillary bodies that should be responsible to making sure that the elections are free, fair, and credible. So it has been even more imperative that you have an election agent. And then it turns out you don't, because you don't have the funding for it. And yet they keep on insisting that CCC is winning big. I think this is such a contradiction that honestly, I think Zimbabweans must wake up to the reality that these elections are being rigged, and CCC are actually helping Zanu PF to make that possible, to make that happen. And I think that is an outrage.
Yes, I agree with you completely. I cannot see how CCC can be able to fund all this. Honestly, I really cannot see. Secondly, I mean, I believe they have to move people from different places to go and actually do the supervision of the whole process, from different areas, kind of like crisscross everybody, so that at least you are somewhat safe. You're not doing it in your area, because if you're doing it in your area, you are subject to getting caught out and getting beaten up, or whatever the case is, the house is burnt. So it'll be safer for them to do it that way. But do they have the funding? I truly don't think so. I think he was better off when he was leader and he still had the resources. Let's remember, the resources were taken away by this same character. Mwonzora took away some of the resources. The Kupe also took away some of the resources, and they had to build from scratch. Did they get funding? I don't think so. Will they be able to fund? Did they create any fund me, or I don't think so. I never saw it circulate. So I'm quite skeptical to say, are they going to be able to cover these whole 12,000 plus polling stations? I truly don't think so.
Well, I think that is another point. The number of polling stations have been increasing at a phenomenal rate. In 2008, there were something like 10 polling stations per constituency. And if there are 210, so there were 2,100 polling stations in the whole country. And these numbers have been increasing. In 2013, 5 years later, the number had gone up to 9,000. And then in 2018, it was over 11,000. And now we are being told it's over 12,000. And to be quite honest, if you are going to have any meaningful election agent, you don't want one person at a polling station. Because if they should go for a break, nobody. And remember, here we're dealing with a political system that in which almost all the people involved are captured by Zanu PF. You can't trust the SEC, you can't trust the police, you can't trust any of the other people involved in this whole election process. So if your agent is not there, you know, God knows what mischief will happen then. But in this case here, when you know that you are dealing with a system that is so corrupt, it is then imperative that you should have enough election agents. And in this case, you should be looking at probably something like 4 per polling station. And they are absolutely right. If they had got the funding for it, that would have gone a long way to make sure that they've got election agents. But in this case, yes, Zanu PF has blocked that. I remember reading that article that Zanu PF has said this money that was supposed to be available to help with the funding of training of election agents and deploying them has been blocked because Zanu PF claimed it is interfering with Zimbabwe's internal affairs. There should not be foreign funding of the election process. But of course, itself, it gets funding directly or indirectly from countries like China and so forth. This is the reality we've got to deal with here. I think there's going to be consequences, if you ask me, Ben, if people were to discover, and they will discover, that CCC did not have election agents in a number of polling stations in this election.
In a lot of polling stations. It's not just a number. In a lot of polling stations. I honestly don't see how they can cover this. I honestly cannot see. Unless they are asking people to volunteer. And this is probably why they have these apps and all that. And it only covers as much because, like we are saying, in rural areas, some place there is no internet. Some people cannot use these gadgets for, we have to learn to be realistic. Let us stop. Okay, we really want, we are desperate for change, but let us not throw our reasoning out of the window just because of desperation. I mean, if Chamisa says he had everything covered, he had a show plan the last time out, and then just recently when he was talking on some South African, this is where he said this 500 when he was talking to some South African channel that we failed to have 500 and something, just over 500 something polling stations were not covered. But he said that it was a sure thing. So which meant he lied to the people. Right? Now we are back to the truth now is it's over 2000. And I honestly believe it is over 2000. And that is 20%, like you said, 20% of the entire polling stations that were uncovered, that were just, a pocket for a free pocket for Zanu PF to pick. And they did what they needed to do. And they got they got the 8%, probably that's what they needed. But I think they did more to it. Because I mean, some of the numbers that were coming out were ridiculous. And that is where some of the numbers that were duplicate and all that they came out from. And I think Zanu PF knows this is exactly what is going to happen. And now it's even worse because the little they had has since been taken by Mwonzora and Kube the last time when they lost those, the court claims. Every money was taken. And I do not know where he's getting his money from. And I don't think he's got that money to cover that. I think it's a big mess. And I think people just need to. This is reality. This is reality, not the fiction to say the next day or on the 24th we are going to be celebrating. We need to cover this now.
Well, I think the other point to be emphasized here is that CCC, Chamisa and this group are themselves the ones who have been putting a lot of emphasis on this very point that they will guard the vote. I think even in a developed country like the UK, USA or Canada, having an election agent at the polling station is standard. You just want to make sure that the counting is being done in a transparent and clear manner. But to have none is simply an outrage. Particularly when you've been telling the public that you will have election agents. And then when you do not want to admit it. You keep on deceiving people and want to pretend that you had the election agents. But I think this time, and the truth will ultimately come out, there's no doubt about it. When the truth comes out and people realize that CCC did not even have election agents, and I totally agree with you in many of the polling stations. Again, I think the people will be angry this time. And I hope this will be the wake-up call finally for the people of Zimbabwe to realize this is a circus. We should at least implement the democratic reforms. Make sure that the police, the ZEC, and all these other institutions are free to do to carry out their responsibility in a professional way. And then we can still have election agents at a polling station. That will be supplementary. But to ignore that, to decide you are going to go into an election without any of these reforms, and then still go on to have not even an election agent, I think it's just being reckless, absolutely reckless. I find that this situation to be really desperately annoying and unfair to the ordinary Zimbabwean. They, like you correctly say, we are desperate for change. And we think they are going to have change on the 24th of August, only to be disappointed again. Because Zanu PF, I mean, let's face it, if they don't have an election agent at the polling station, what's there to stop them saying, well, okay, let's wait to see how our candidate is performing. And then you realize, our candidate is lagging behind. And you boost your figures. Who is there to say you had only 240 people who voted, and not 540. There's nobody from the opposition to say, well, these are the number of ballot papers that were cast. What are we counting here? Where is the 500 come from? They can just boost it, write whatever they want. And I think this is exactly what is going to happen again. I think this is really, this is an outrage, absolutely an outrage. Unbelievable. These people have been deceiving people, lying to people, and dragging the nation into a totally unnecessary election process, which could only produce one result: is Zanu PF victory.
I agree with you. I mean, you can see that Triple C they lied with all this. I mean, look at some of the numbers, that that ZEC announces. I mean, you're looking at a place like Chirezi, and you are looking at a place like the whole of Gweru. I mean, Gweru is the third capital city. And Chirezi has got a population, not even Chirezi, Chirugu had a population of, almost times 2 that of Gweru. That is just bizarre. And people from Chirugu come to Gweru as like, we are going to town. So how does that work? You see, this is some of the irregularities that show and point that, a lot of places were unguarded and had no one there, and Zanu PF had the free world. They could do whatever they pleased with the numbers. That's why you find some of the numbers were so ridiculous in some areas, some constituencies. Like, I've been to Chirezi. I don't think there's a population in that area where there's over 36,000 people in just one constituency. Come on, guys. Chirezi doesn't even have even a combi to ferry people. It's just one location, and then that's it. And yet, you got a place like Gweru that has got from Koba 1 to Koba 20. And then there is just one of the locations that are there, and there are so many others. The tapas, the whatever. It's crazy. It's really crazy. So, in conclusion, I would like to say, let's do a reality check. It's pointless. Yes, we know we need change, but we need to use our heads. We need to stop lying to ourselves. It's unfortunately it's just 2 weeks away when reality is going to sink in to say, what, we were just playing and we were messing our. When ZEC starts to do its business, I am telling you, we'll be so gutted. This is the time to try and figure out if what these guys are selling, is it the truth or is it lies again? These guys went to court, to the Concord, with no shred of evidence. Let us not be lied to. They had no evidence whatsoever. They just had fancy talk. And that is why they lost the case. And that is the truth. They can go wherever. That is the truth. They did not have the V-levels to prove their case. They had just a few that were taken randomly, and that can cut it. This time it can't. I mean, if you're going to have all those with loopholes, what is the purpose of this whole thing? That's all I can say.
If you're going to lose by 8%, and then it turns out that you do not have, even with the 544 polling stations that Chamisa admitted in that interview, out of the 11,000, that 500 constitutes 4%, and you lost by 0.8%. That is very significant, And in this particular case, it turns out it was actually more than that. It was much more than that. It was 4 times as much. So we are now looking at 20% of the polling stations did not have an agent. it's becoming more and more meaningless and ridiculous. I mean, Zanu PF is not as if it needs help to rig elections. They've got so many other opportunities to rig elections, and now you're giving them another easy way. On the day itself they can keep topping their figure, to make sure that if Mnangagwa does not win outright, he will see to it that the figure is increased to the point where Chamisa does not win the majority, the 50% plus one, to be declared the winner, so that there is a runoff. This is becoming a nightmare, and these people are participating in these elections for no other reason than greed, as we've been saying again and again, quoting from David Coulthard's admission in his book. These elections are so flawed, so illegal, that really the only logical step to do is to stop participating in them. And our friend here, Mwonzora, yes, he has withdrawn because he realized he wasn't going to win anything. And now he wants to claim that he has seen the light, that the election is flawed. But let's just listen to him, and then we can give our closing remarks, Ben.
Secured funding for training of polling agents. The high-level political platform is a platform which is brokered by the Zimbabwe Institute, and it is made up of 3 political parties represented in parliament. That is the MDC, CCC, and Zanu PF. These parties secured funding for the training and deployment of polling agents, and it secured funding to the tune of 3 million euro that was supposed to be used in this regard. The training and deployment of polling agents is important to ensure transparency in an election. As you know, in 2018, about 2,000 polling stations did not have MDC polling agents. And we had thought that we were going to cure this problem. And the money was actually secured from from some of the philanthropic donors. However, the Zanu PF has blocked this money, with the net result that the MDC and the other parties are unable at least to fund their election agents. This is intended to ensure that there's opaqueness in this election. It is intended to make sure that rigging of elections is expedited, or it is enabled. Our constitution provides that once the election dates have been declared, there must not be change in electoral law. But contrary to all this, just last week, there was promulgation of a statutory instrument to govern postal votes, to govern an aspect of this election. And this is totally illegal.
Well, we can stop there. I think this is going on to another aspect of how these elections are going to be rigged. Because right now, I don't know whether you have picked it up yourself. As far as I know, the ballots have not yet been printed. And we are only 2 weeks to go to the elections. And yet they should have been printed and sent to those who are entitled to vote by postal votes. And how ZEC is going to make up for the lost time is beggars belief, So that is another aspect, but we can talk about it tomorrow. If we focus back on this issue of the failure to fund election agents, I think this is a worrying thing, Ben, and I personally am really frustrated by it all. I don't know whether you want to give your closing remarks on that issue.
This is Zanu PF doing what Zanu PF does best. And unfortunately, when people see the thousands of people that throng Chamisa, they think it's going to be an easy breeze. No. That is not true. Zanu PF will do everything in their power to keep, to keep themselves in this position. And this is one of the tricks that they use, foul play. This money that was donated, they do not want it. But we all know that they are getting funded from China. They're getting loans from China. Zanu PF itself gets money direct from government. Taxpayers' money is being used to do all their dirty deeds. But this is part of it. And knowingly, they shouldn't cry. I mean, now it's Mwonzora is crying just because of, many other issues, underlining issues. But he knew when he signed up, when he took his, his nomination to say, I want to go and be president, he knew what the ground was and how Zanu PF plays without reforms. So he shouldn't cry. And people should see this. This is what Zanu PF is doing. And Zanu PF has always been doing shady things just to retain power. And this is just, unfortunately, this is just one of the dirty deeds that, amongst others, we are going to see them all come the 24th when reality sets in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. My closing remarks to any Zimbabweans who are listening out there is 2 points. The number one point is Chamisa should come clean on how many polling stations did not have election agents in 2018. And more significantly, does he have, it's only 4 weeks now to go before the voting day. So he should know whether he has got the election agents for all the 12,000 plus polling stations for these coming elections. We cannot keep on having a situation where we are dragged into an election process and then, allow Zanu PF to rig the elections with complete liberty. Because if surely you do not have polling agents in even 5% of the polling stations, Zanu PF won last time with only 0.8%. What does that mean? That they are rigging, even if they had maybe 0.8 or 1% of the polling stations which were favorable to them, they would have got over the line. In this case here, when you're looking at 2,000, 20%, this is becoming an outrage. We need to know how many polling stations Zanu CCC is going to fund. And there's got agents already lined up who will be there from the starting of the process to the finishing of the process. We cannot keep on having this situation where we drag people through this mincemeat, promising them that there will be meaningful change. CCC is going to win big, when we know there is no chance of CCC winning these elections. This is an outrage. We must stop this madness. And with that, I would like to thank Ben for joining me on this discussion, and we'll speak to you tomorrow.
Thank you. Good night.